thank you for being here, first of all. So we're going to do an exercise that starts with you actually telling a story. A story about an event that we all have experienced in common. And you're not going to have enough time to do the whole thing. I'm going to give you between 7 and 10 minutes to write it. But after that, we're going to explore that story and the stories that we've all told about it, to take a look at how history happens and warps out of shape over time. So the issue we're going to look at is the issue around the library here in town. So I'm going to ask you each to write your story of the battle to get the new library approved. Whatever you know about it. You may know a lot about it, you may know a little about it. It was a multi-year effort, so whatever sliver you have, telling the story of what the issue was. So you may focus on why it was such a struggle. You could focus on the old library, and how that worked, the new library, whatever you know. Well, let me go back a second. From Bernardston, do you know anything about this issue at all?
I know a little about it, but I'm the one that will have the smallest sliver.
Do we have to be political?
No.
Because that was a political event, but well, I have a lot of feelings about that library with the context of libraries.
However you want to tell the story and whatever angle you want to talk about it, that's great.
Good.
Yeah.
I'd prefer to talk about the library because I can still be creative in what I write.
Okay.
I don't know every bit of the detail.
No, none of us do. So you're going to write what you know of that event.
Okay.
In whatever way you have to tell that story. So I'm going to put the histories aside for a moment, and I'm going to ask you to imagine that it's the year 2265.
Say it again?
It's the year 2265.
So I'm 200 and...
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, so all the treatments have worked.
300 years.
And so the question is, what are some things that might happen or have happened between now and 2265? Small things, large things. Imagine what could happen in the next couple of hundred years. They could be good things, they could be bad things, they could be cataclysmic things. We are, for the sake of, when I do this with kids especially, I have to make sure that we all agree that the world has not ended. So whatever's happened has not been entirely destructive, because at least somebody in the class their first impulse is, well, we've all blown up and it's all over. But we're assuming we've survived this one. But what are some things that could happen? We're just going to put that list up on the board here of what some of those things might be. So what's one thing? Yeah, Carol?
Well, wildlife, some wildlife has become extinct.
Yeah,
Okay.
The climate has changed.
Okay, and in what way? So if
we're in this particular, in Greenfield, Massachusetts, we're tropical.
Okay, so we have become tropical. Okay, what else? What else might happen between now and then? Yes.
We've colonized the solar system.
Okay. Okay, so we have landed in other places, and now some people live up there. Or maybe all of us live up there. Who knows? What else? What else could happen?
The majority of Americans are people of color.
Okay. So I would...
Or mixed.
Very mixed.
Okay. I would suggest the possibility that there is no more America. Maybe there are no countries, or maybe there is an entirely other
one country.
Or one big massive country. Okay, what else? What else could happen?
We could have overthrown all government and gone back to living in small communities.
Okay.
Which includes growing our own food. That food has become a
Self-sufficient.
sufficient
Yes, so we are
thing and
self-sufficient, yeah.
a major industry.
We could have cured cancer. So it's not all disaster by any stretch. What else? What else could happen in the next 200?
We want to focus a little on what could specifically happen here in Greenfield.
There may not be a Greenfield in 245 years, or Greenfield could have taken over the world. We don't know.
By the new colonizers.
Yes.
Yeah, the new colonizers, right?
Yeah, we colonized Pluto.
We could be on the verge of building a library, you know.
Finally.
Yeah.
Skyscrapers are a thing of the past.
Uh-huh.
Interstate highways are no longer available either. They've been either dug up and made more natural, or I don't know. I'm not going to.
Well, do we actually have cars at this point, or how?
Well, I was thinking about that. We could be hovering and flying around.
Hovercrafts.
Hovercrafts.
Okay.
I can only think of Star Trek. I'm
Well,
not much of a science fiction person.
We've got to say something about water.
Yeah.
so what
Water
would you
is
like
such
to
a
say?
big thing. New technologies have been developed for providing safe drinking water.
Okay.
Yeah, if we have all those gardens, we need water, so.
How about we figured out how to make ocean water drinkable?
Yeah.
And then, so then now we're working on
That's not
draining the
absolutely
oceans.
science fiction.
What can we destroy that?
Yeah, exactly. That's where my
Well,
mind
the
goes.
proportion of land to water has gotten even greater, so we've learned how to build either on water with floating vehicles, buildings, or something of that nature.
And we could have lost cities.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that would be
Right, when the
one.
water rises.
We could have Lake Hitchcock could return.
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
The Connecticut floods and that's that.
Uh-huh.
That's what's happening. We
question of-
figured out how to be the balance between small community and global. We figured out that balance that we can go back to our small, you know, what Vanessa said about small communities, but be plugged into the globe as opposed to different, you know, I mean, we've gone beyond countries and that kind of thing. So, and that's part of the mixed ethnicities and stuff too, because if you take away all of those territorial boundaries, you increase the amount of inner involvement.
Mhm.
And so people's
I'm going to repeat mine. There's more of a virtual world, which means we're ordering more things online, we're interacting more online, we're doing a lot of the things that are done in brick and mortar virtually.
Mhm.
Are the people who live in Greenfield in the year 2265, are they people who have ancestors here now?
Some do, some don't.
And what happened to the people who are not, who don't have descendants in that year?
Well, I think there's got to be some, but there's also, because of that sense of nomad, like if Boston and New York are gone, and we're closer to the edge of the ocean, I mean, there's been movement, so families have moved too. So I say some have stayed, some have figured out ways to stay buckled, but a lot of them have been nomadic. Have
And what
moved
about
away.
the structures of Greenfield?
Well, they may
What
not.
houses were built around 1900? Are they still
they may not be sustainable anymore because 300, not only is wood rotting, but our atmosphere is different.
So
if we're
what
more
kind of housing
tropical,
might we have?
if we're more tropical, then
Tree houses.
Yeah.
you know what else?
No.
Adobe. I mean, isn't that
Yeah, I don't know.
what?
Hogans?
Stuff that's not going to disintegrate in the wet,
So
like today, like my rug.
Oh boy. So your rug's not going to make it to 20
so stuff that won't
22,
disintegrate.
No, my rug is not making it to
tomorrow.
next week.
Yeah.
And one possibility is that English isn't spoken anymore.
That's true too.
I think
Although,
Or maybe it's
The only
spoken.
language.
Say what?
It's the only language spoken anywhere.
Or it could be.
Yeah.
Right? So all that could change.
I wonder about diet. I wonder if things will have changed in terms of what foods continue to be available and what the attitudes are for
and necessities
food
too, like what our bodies are going to need.
Right.
Soylent Green.
There's a happy thought.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I'm going to have one other, we'll stop this part of it and have one other short conversation about the difference between facts and opinions. So, what is the difference between facts and opinions? What's a fact? What's an opinion? How do we tell the difference? What makes something a fact?
Evidence?
Okay? Say a little more.
Well, we talked the other day about primary source evidence and primary source materials where we know something has been produced at a given time by a given person. And so if it was spoken or written, we know that that is factual, if it were preserved.
Okay. And an opinion? What makes an opinion different than a fact?
It's not always based on facts.
Say what?
It's not always based on facts, but it could be.
Okay. Other thoughts? What makes a fact different than an opinion?
A fact isn't based on emotions, typically. Unless
Well,
unless it is.
yeah. That's one of those clear as mud kinds of things, right?
I'll put that as a question.
Okay. What else? What else makes something a fact contrasted with an opinion?
Verification from a number of different people.
Okay. So I think again for the maybe to put it most succinctly, a fact is something that can be verified from outside of a person, or so you can say it's raining out and you can verify that. You can go out and look. Now a fact can be wrong, but it's still a fact. An opinion is inseparable from the person.
Correct, yes.
Okay, does that make sense?
Person or persons,
Yeah, well, wherever it's coming from.
yes.
So an opinion, it's hard, you can't separate the opinion from the person. They're attached to it. But a fact can exist, can be verified outside of that, the person or persons.
And opinions often get passed down in families as fact.
Well, that whole mess of fact and opinion is part of what we're looking at tonight. Okay? So, thinking about fact and opinion, thinking about all of these things that could happen in the next 245 years, we are going to return to our histories. We have these histories. Now, it's been 245 years. And some of the histories disappeared in flood. And some of them actually went off into space. when we colonized. They were packing material for what went into them. There's at least one that's at the bottom of Lake Hitchcock. The new Lake Hitchcock. Some of the wildlife that is extinct. Well, we'll leave the life.
Some of the wildlife that's still around.
Some of the
might have
wildlife, yeah,
nested-
use
they
it for
nest-
nesting
yeah.
material.
Those old
and
houses had a lot of rodents.
They did. They did. Some of where these history landed were not actually places where English is spoken. So this is a meaningless piece. What else do we have over here?
Well, some of them moved across country and are in attics or basements far
that's
from
true.
here.
In a different spot.
So
Yeah.
it turns out there is only one surviving history of the library experience. So this is the official history of what happened.
Uh-oh.
So as you're listening to this, think about a few things. Think about fact and opinion. What's in here that's a fact? What's in here that is an opinion? What are we not sure about? What do we know about? What don't we know about? Did whoever wrote this, and we don't know who wrote this, is it clear what they were writing about? And is there anything they missed? So here it is. The years-long debate on the Greenfield Public Library's efforts to gain the support of its citizenry became a regular topic in the Greenfield Recorder. As someone who loves books and, even as a Bernardston resident, has used the library on many occasions, most recently for research purposes, I was surprised to see there were so many voices objecting to the project to build a nice facility. I remember that some of the town council members participated in a day of trying to raise community awareness of the need to provide accommodations for all patrons. At least 2 council members experienced the library via wheelchairs and learned firsthand what it was like to navigate the present building, not adapted to handicap access. Cost seems to have been a great concern to voters in town, although the grant funds available offered Greenfield a sizable funding opportunity. So, what facts are here? What opinions are here? I'll start reading it and let's figure out what we've got. The years-long debate on the Greenfield Public Library's efforts to gain the support of its citizenry became a regular topic in the Greenfield Recorder.
So there was a debate about having a library, a new library in Greenfield.
Is that a fact or an opinion?
It's a fact.
Okay.
And it's in the newspaper,
Yeah, and it was in the.
Well, now wait a minute.
or in the
It's in the
Greenfield
Greenfield
Recorder.
Recorder, whatever that was.
Right,
Right.
sorry.
So that's a question. What is the Greenfield Recorder?
Right.
Okay? As someone who loves books, do we still know what books are 245 years
Yes.
from now? We probably do, but
That's the literacy person's response.
there better be. And even as a Bernardston resident,
What's Bernardston?
that is, well, we asked that today, but we're especially going to ask that 200 and some odd years. As someone who loves books and even as a Bernardston resident has used the library on many occasions, most recently for research purposes, I was surprised to see there were so many voices objecting to the project to build a nice facility. Okay,
The narrator
So the narrator,
is a researcher and likes books.
And resident of this place that was called Bernardston.
okay, so those
Who's
are all,
gonna do
She's-
that?
And the,
right.
she states an opinion about
She's
her
surprised.
surprise.
Mhm.
Oh my God, this is a diagram.
So it's a fact that she was surprised.
Yes.
The fact that she had an opinion.
She had an opinion and
Do we
she
know-
was surprised.
Do we know it's a she?
No, we don't. He,
No,
she.
the narrator,
Narrator.
whoever it is, the writer.
Do we say they in the future?
Yep,
Oh, my
yeah, we do.
Well, for the moment, we better.
I think we do.
Uh-huh.
That's the best available.
And there were so many voices objecting to the project to build a nice facility.
So that would have to be verified, it's stated as a fact, but we don't know for sure
Well, and we don't know what so many means. Is so many 3?
what that means.
Is it 100? Is it half the town? We don't know.
Okay.
There was objection. I remember that some of the town council members participated in a day of trying to raise community awareness of the need to provide accommodations for all patrons.
It was the fact that the town council had a meeting, hold a meeting.
Okay?
What is the
Do
town
we know
council?
what a town council is?
Well, that would be a question.
What are patrons?
So what are patrons, what kind of accommodations? Are they going to sleep there? Is this are there kitchens?
What does it mean to raise?
Well, so far, at least 2 council members experienced the library via wheelchairs and learned firsthand what it was like to navigate the present building, not adapted to handicap access.
Fact, there were 2 people at the meeting in wheelchairs.
Okay. Cost seems to have been a great concern to voters in town, although the grant funds available offered Greenfield a sizable funding opportunity.
So they got a grant.
Whatever that is.
So grant funds available. So there were monies available. But it looks like cost seems to have been a great concern. So
Right.
perhaps the objections were related to cost. That's suggested. Okay.
And that's sort of the factual way of putting it, that it seems to have been to this writer.
Mm-hmm.
They're not asserting that it was, but that it seems to have been.
Well, as luck would have it,
We found some
one of those spaceships showed back up. And as we were unpacking what was on the ship, there was other paper. Which may or may not have anything to do with the first paper. So as we're listening, let's see if this account matches or connects with or contradicts the previous account, or what sense we can make of it, and the same questions about facts and opinions. It is headlined, "The New Library." So
There was mention of the library in the last one, right?
yeah. Yeah. So there may be potential confirmation here. I love libraries. It says here, primarily because I love books. Here's another match.
Aha, people like books.
At least 2 of them. Why is that? I don't recall, but books and libraries I do indeed love. It's starting to sound like Dr. Seuss a little bit. It's great.
Wasn't meant to be, but I guess
So,
you could say that.
When I moved to Greenfield, the first visit I made, the first exploration was its library. Sited in an historic building, it had history. It had a cozy, home-like atmosphere with a nod to the modern age of a side room full of public use computers. It had its own smell. It had comfy chairs, one in which I immediately sought out and, picking a book from the new recommended shelf, settled in. That was some years ago. I still come to the library to check out books. And I came to the library to attend a writing group. I felt at home. Then there was this event. The town was to get a new, brand spanking new modern library. Well, 1 year, 2 years, I began to order my books online, so I saw our world changing. I must say I had no hesitation in supporting a new modern library and was completely shocked when it turned out there were many folks in Greenfield who did not want a new library. This disturbed me, but I guess also I found myself ambivalent. The idea of a new library, total agreement. The need to keep up with the world, I'm all in. But giving up the charm of the brick and mortar, that was sad. but move forward we must. I now look forward to the new construction, the new worlds I will explore in the new modern library. So clearly some opinion there.
Yes.
Question, giving up the brick and mortar for what? Was the new library not going to be?
A little editing, you would have had more time to expand on what the brick and mortar of that historic period versus what was coming in the new brick and mortar.
Well, I'm just saying, what can we tell from this written
Yeah.
document that's 245
So we have some
years?
questions
Okay.
about
So
what
we have
that
lots of
means.
questions.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think you can see what will happen if we keep picking them up and saying, comparing and contrasting. I think, okay, I'll read this one once, just so we get another.
Up there.
The quest for a new library came about when the town, or city, discovered there was state money available as a sort of matching grant to modernize existing libraries. Since this was a one-time apparent opportunity, the allotted money would go to another municipality if Greenfield did not claim it. It seemed like a no-brainer, if not a slightly rushed plan, to grab at this money. People who do not use the library in town seem generally opposed to this idea under the pretense of not wanting their already high taxes raised. At first I was a little ambivalent, but when I started to see no new library, with big letters, signs around town, I got upset and angry at the sentiment these signs conveyed, that learning and access to learning and resources was not valuable to a lot of my neighbors.
All the writers were surprised in some way, and it's about the same, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so as we're looking at this picture, what do we know, what do we still not know? What are the questions that these writers have
We don't know
raised?
whether he got it or not.
Right. Yeah.
What else? What other questions?
We don't really
Jump
know,
out.
we don't really know its cost. What it
No, we
ultimately
don't know
cost.
what's cost at all, right? And we don't really know the pros and cons of why and why not. I mean,
Yes, we
Yeah.
got kind of one-sided,
we got
people who
some
love
opinions.
books.
Right.
Yeah.
We got kind of the same.
And the accessibility stuff.
Which may or may not be meaningful
Meaningful to-
245
right,
years from
exactly.
now.
But it shows a stage of development.
Correct,
Mm.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that new library may or may not be in existence.
Right.
That's right.
Oh.
It might have been taken out in a tornado or
Flooded or it
an
may,
extreme weather event.
yeah.
And I would ask, what did the old library smell like? That wasn't a good smell. I mean, I think it was a good smell, but what did it smell?
Right, and
Yeah,
since
what
it
is
is
this
now
now?
tropical, do we even have paper in this new world?
Yeah, or the virtual that he was talking about earlier.
Or is, yeah,
maybe,
is everything
this time.
kind of constructed to withstand humidity and dampness?
How about the stories that didn't make it?
Yeah, that,
What questions do we have about them?
What could they have told us? I mean, were there people who opposed the library?
So, would any of these stories have been censored? I'm taking what you said and taking it maybe somewhere else, but
Sure.
but are the accounts that survived perhaps ones that were politically preserved rather than?
Well, we do have 3 for 3 for a library. So that seems to indicate, they're hiding some voices maybe.
Well, it raises the question.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. What else? Anything?
Well, at the same time, if we only have 6 or 3 accounts, how do we not know there isn't someone out there who knows something about this. And where would we go to find that?
So, spoken as a researcher.
Yeah.
So the question of how would we verify or go deeper into this, right? Which is a very relevant and pertinent question to us. So I want to make a big shift here, and we'll sort of make maybe a larger conversation includes this one. So this year, whatever it was,
2265.
That one, yeah, is 245 years ago, if my math is right, or in the future. Anybody know what happened 245 years ago
Today.
from today?
So in
Minus 245 from today.
So 18
Something.
1776.
Yeah.
Does that ring a bell?
Oh, you did that on purpose.
I did! All right, so when we think about what we think we know about 1776 and what happened then, what questions come up based on this?
Many.
Such as?
Did we get the full story?
Okay.
And what was hidden?
Yeah, what voices were hidden?
Whose stories?
Whose stories were lost to time, yeah.
And whose stories tend to end up on the floor?
The
Yes.
dominant-
Well, so let's be specific. What groups of people
The other
tend
side.
to, well, sometimes the other side politically. Who else ends up on the floor?
Marginalized.
Marginalized, so people of color, women, children, perhaps people with disabilities or who speak a different language. Those are the stories that hit the floor.
Non-landowners. Non-landowners, specifically in the 1776. It was,
Exactly.
yeah.
the white boys are. I mean, if the photographs, if the paintings are anything of truth, then whose voices we heard were white males
And rich white men.
and rich landowners.
They didn't spend a lot of time necessarily painting portraits of poor farmers or folks who were living on the street. So,
In terms of this history, we really might be missing, in this case, we might be missing landowners who are poor, who can't afford the taxes to go up. We don't really have any documents from their standpoint.
Well, we know nothing about the opposition.
Nothing, yeah.
So,
we know very
Other than
little
it
about
shocked the book
proponents
lovers.
here.
yeah.
Right.
We do know that there was opposition, though.
Yes.
That was the key thing, is the idea, the question of whether some voices were hidden. It seems if they were, it wasn't deliberate because we all acknowledged that there was opposition.
So what does that raise for us as we're thinking about the work we're doing here in surfacing Greenfield history and gathering stories and trying to understand who we are and how we've come to be to this place? What does it raise for us for things to think about and for things to be guided by as we move forward? Yeah.
It's always important to question what you're told, or what has been the narrative, the dominant narrative. Hi, Carol. Hi, Carol. And we can't just count on what's been written down or spoken. For this number of years, I was going to raise the idea of oral history is important. You can only go so far back.
Mm-hmm.
If we're talking 2265, that's a lot of years from now.
Mm-hmm. And if we wanted to explore this in a more compressed way, it could be 30 years ahead or something so that there are people we could go back and talk to.
Right, and if it's a piece of a larger question that the researchers are asking, like they're trying to evolve a new library, recreate a library and in our presence, and can we go back and see what the history of libraries was?
Mm-hmm.
So there may be, if the library does still exist in the future, in some form that has had continuity, that would be an excellent source of tracing the changes over time, and how, how it went down historically. They might have, those newspaper accounts, we might be able to find them wherever they are over there.
Or we might actually realize they are newspaper accounts.
Or we might find a descendant of somebody whose family story included some active role in the library controversy.
We could find a diary of a librarian or somebody active. Yeah, Karen?
I have to remember what I was going to say. We don't know for sure from this exercise of looking at, of reporting what we know of the library controversy and what went on more recently. We don't know, could everyone access the library back then? Or was there some sort of segregation? We don't know much. We know a few pieces.
We know that people
we know
who
there
rely on
was
wheelchairs had a rough time
accessing.
But there also, was everybody allowed in?
Yes.
It was
Yeah, we
don't
accessible
know
for
that.
physical or
Right.
other reasons.
Yeah.
I also wonder from the history, what is it that, what else was going on in the town? I mean, what kind of town is what was happening in Greenfield, what was happening in the world, such that people were not sure they wanted a library, or a library that was...
Nothing by what we know from this.
So there was no context for this war.
Right.
And in some of these, in fact, in all of these, we have no idea when it was happening.
That's right, there's no,
There's no
nobody
year.
wrote any
There's no-
time context.
But in giving the directions, you referenced it, so we all made the assumption that what we're writing would be based on the directive.
So how could we, what's some of the stuff we could do to figure out when, if for some reason we don't have that information already?
Well, if we knew there were a building standing that was serving as the library in 2265,
Okay.
we might be able to figure out the date of that.
The origin date of the building.
What about the documents themselves? What kind of evidence do they give us?
Paper.
Okay, there's a certain kind of paper, right?
Yeah, and then we can make age, you can determine the age of the paper by,
Right.
And the ink.
and the ink.
By how it was made, the composition of the paper.
Right.
And I think the paper, did it have holes?
Yes, it
Yes.
did.
Yeah.
It was perforated.
Yeah, so there's a whole lot
Of
that can
information.
narrow it down just in terms of the paper that the accounts were written on.
Well, and let's take it back 245 years. How do we go about trying to learn about things that happened during that period? I mean, what do we do to verify or to question or to dig deeper?
Well,
Now,
I think papers and fabrics are one of the ways, right?
Big,
Mhm.
big, and paintings, and diaries. I mean, all of those.
But I mean, even physically, what kind of fabric was used for something
Oh yeah, definitely.
can become a
Major
dating
historical.
mechanism. Yeah.
But
And-
also,
There.
Oh, go on.
we don't know, like right now, we know where we are in terms of computers and electronic access. We don't know in 200, however many years it is,
Right.
what that's going to be, and whether things, I mean, just like you think of those floppy disks we used to
Yeah.
have. You got one, what do you
Dissertations
do
on.
with it?
Well, that's I think one of the fascinating things about computers that, from a historian standpoint, I mean, we still can read stuff that was chiseled in stone. We can still read stuff that was written with a pencil.
Yeah.
But we can't read stuff that was written on a computer 20, 30, or 40 years ago,
Yeah.
Right.
My
which is
dissertation.
just fascinating.
Right.
Yeah, we had those big things.
So if 99%
for-
of the accounts of the library were written on computers that no longer exist because we reverted to subsistence farming, and all we can find is, rusty hard drives when we dig in the soil,
It's gone.
it's gone.
But remember, we learned the other day that the city of Greenfield has, is it a safe that was referred to the other day? that they have a safe where all the council minutes or the town's history is locked up. And as long as that safe is still preserved.
So there's a chance there's more
There's a
information.
history.
Right, so where are the repositories of information?
Yeah.
And what do you do this is a room, I wouldn't say full, because there aren't that many of us, but of people who are historians of one sort or another. What do you do when accounts don't agree? What would happen if the one that we had, one of the surviving ones, either violently opposed your sense of things or absolutely disagreed with the previous one? What do you do then? How do you make sense? How do we make sense of that?
Yeah, if the very first document happened to say something like, at the waste of a great deal of taxpayers' money, there was a ridiculous project that proposed that our perfectly fine library wasn't good enough. And our taxes were raised and it never got built anyway, and, you know.
And we all go to computers anyway. Who needs a library?
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you that what I do when I find things like that is I try to find out information on the writer and is this person, who was this person, if I have some doubt. Who was this person, and was this person an active community member? I even look at the political side, you know, what might that tell me about that person's opinion?
If there's a name.
If there's a name.
There weren't on these, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if there are dates, based on what we've got up here so far, if we can narrow the dates down and we can kind of know that we're talking about this particular library that we've all lived through the controversy about, and those city council minutes are preserved in a vault, we could find the minutes of the meetings where this issue was discussed, and we would have then a lot of names, people stepping up saying, my name is such and such, I live on such and such, and I'm here to speak for my 3 minutes against or for this proposition. And then we would just crack open just a treasure trove of threads to follow.
And we might be able to figure out, if we were lucky, what kind of grant was out there for libraries.
Well, that would be in the minutes too, for sure.
And that would give us some more clues. Yeah.
There might also be existing at the time a body like, I don't know, the Massachusetts Library Organization or Association or something that is based in Boston and also has a vault. So there might be other
But it went to the bottom of the ocean.
You mean the Boston underwater one?
Okay, Boston is gone.
But it's in a waterproof container.
Yeah, like they dug for.
Well, like they go,
Titanic.
like they're still doing explorations of the Titanic and discovering new things. So they're
Amazing stuff.
still doing,
Yeah, and we're still
Yeah.
discovering things from 1776.
Yep,
That's right.
yep.
Yeah, thinking back to the presentation that Joe and David did in the first night, right? The presentation that Joe and David did about Native.
Oh, yeah, the 30,000 years ago.
And what we know or don't know, and how we make sense of what's discovered.
We continue to question it. When I walk in the woods, I just think, oh my gosh, Native peoples lived in land like this. I mean, I don't live in Northfield, I live in Bernardston, but I just think, and the trees, were they like this when they were here? And you know, just the rock formations, all of that. So I think that's what makes history so exciting, that it's always to be questioned.
That brings up a related idea here for me, which is always question not only the dominant narrative, but our own assumptions.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about, I read an article a number of years ago about these structures in the Vermont woods that when they were first found by people who became, you know, the descendants of settlers in Vermont, they assumed that they had been built by the colonists. They just assumed that they were, you know, winter storage places or something that the colonists had been built, because it never crossed their mind that the Native American inhabitants of the area would have done that. And it was politically expedient to not have that cross their minds, because the dominant narrative was they were nomadic people, so we didn't really steal their land. So there was a benefit to not thinking of those structures as representing permanence of other people. So a lot went into kind of not noticing what they really were about.
Or not noticing what's found, because that'll stop your dig.
Yeah.
That's right.
I guess there's always going to be some element of myth in stories, even when you're trying to make it fact, that there is a human tendency to slide in there something that's maybe not 100% true. And
Well, just the facts you choose to share.
Right.
There's an opinion in that, right?
Definitely.
These are the things that are important to share, and maybe I'll leave that one out, or I didn't think of that, or how I shaded that.
I'll share the facts that support my theory.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, and even if you're not doing that with a bias in mind, what comes to mind when you're thinking about something is going to come through that filter.
Right.
So even if you're not doing that, I mean, of course, you can do it intentionally,
Yeah.
and load it up even more. But even for many of us who are not trying to load it up, it's still how you filter it, and what comes through is not going to be necessarily as balanced as.
Objective.
So,
And that brings up another issue, which is, we kind of assume that whatever we find that is a document was written with our ethos, in a sense. If we are not deliberately writing lies, we do not expect that other people do that. But what are future people going to make out of our media accounts of the 2020 election?
for example.
For example.
Yikes.
And how will they sort it out?
How are we sorting it out?
And how are we sorting it out?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Who wrote the book on how to build castles, or how to build?
Oh,
David
yeah,
McCauley.
David
McCauley. Do you have a copy of his? Archaeologists find Hojo's
Hotel of the Mysteries.
Yeah, Motel of the
Yeah,
Mysteries.
Motel of the Mysteries,
Motel
yes.
of the Mysteries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's another just great.
Yeah.
book. It's a
I'll
great.
show it to you.
Yeah. See, he finds the top toilet seat, and he thinks it's some sort of thing that they put around her neck. Ceremonial thing for the king to. It's great.
Yeah.
It's great. It's
There's
great.
another little essay called the Nasarima. Has anybody ever come across that? It's an anthropologist's account of people known as the Nasarima, and they have little medicine boxes that they worship, and some other other details like that. Anyway, the punchline after you've read the whole thing is you realize that it's American spelled backwards. And it's just taking a point of view as if an alien were trying to make sense out of the way we behave.
What we do.
Yeah, and the other interesting thing is what we've talked about here is all above the ground. And I was thinking of archaeologists as you started talking, Wendy. Just that, there's always something under the ground that is meaningful to someone when it's discovered, and does give us more ideas and insights. So, and so.
So we're kind of out of time. So.
Okay.
Thank you.